If you've ever heard the phrase, welfare took black men out of the house, please stay tuned. If you've ever heard and believed that welfare took black men out of the house, please stay tuned. On September 14, in 1967, ADC to be cut if woman has man in the house. The day welfare took black men out of the house. That never happened, but let's talk about why some black men still say that it did. Here's the article. The State Department of Welfare and Institutions is assuming from a letter received from the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, HEW, that welfare authorities view the state's man-in-the-house welfare policy as legal. This interpretation seemingly would iron out the conflict between state and federal policies. Under state policy, if a woman is receiving aid to dependent children, ADC funds, and a man moves in without the benefit of marriage, it is assumed that the man is responsible for support and welfare aid is cut off. Earlier, HEW sought to change this policy and adopt one that required proof. Okay, so that story comes from Jet Magazine. Now, the first thing that I have to start with is that this was not a policy that was race-specific. Remember, this is Jet Magazine. This was the premier magazine for black families across the USA at the time. And if there was a way, trust me, that Jet could have made it so that black men were the victims in this story, they would have, but they didn't. Once you get a glance into the communities of stupid people, though, and men who are looking for excuses to not rear their children that they helped to create, you'll hear this frequently, that welfare took black men out of the house. Malarkey. One of the most common talking points among dummies is that black fathers were forced from their homes and children by black mothers in exchange for welfare benefits in the 1960s. While the man-in-the-house rule did exist, it didn't last for long, and it wasn't specific to black men only. President Franklin D. Roosevelt passed the Social Security Act in 1935. Among other things, it included aid to dependent children, ADC. Black Americans were not included in those benefits in the 1930s, which would mean that by the time this man-in-the-house rule was implemented in the 1960s, that it applied to white women and more recently black women, all who were receiving assistance to care for children whose fathers were not financially providing for them. This 1967 man-in-the-house rule was nothing more than FDR's take on the mother's pension, which was a public benefits program established in the early 1900s for single mothers. Again, at a time when black Americans were not eligible to receive those kinds of government benefits. So this applied to white women, and guess what? One of the main stipulations for them was to receive the money. They could not have the father of the children living in the home. Wow. Yet, I never hear droves of white men complaining that welfare took white men out of the house because our women preferred welfare over us. And to be clear, this 1967 version of the no man in the house rule did not apply to biological fathers. It applied to what the government was calling substitute fathers. Basically, men coming over to have sex with the mother and thus, in some ways, using the benefits that were meant to take care of those children for themselves. And calling them substitute fathers was generous on behalf of the government because often these guys had biological children of their own for whom they were not providing. So they'd rather go live off of some other woman who didn't demand that they man up and get a freaking job and take care of their children. But instead, they would go and live off of some other woman who did not demand anything from them and use those kids' benefits. You know, eating food that should have been for the children, causing utility bills to go up because another person is there under the roof. And mind you, when these jackasses are still complaining about this in 2025, they're not even taking into account that even if what they are saying is true, that welfare took black men out of the home, and that's not true. But even if it were, that's welfare taking black men out of government property, public housing, Or did they really think that the government was running into the homes of black men who had deeds to their own property and kicking them out and giving their wives 20 smackaroos in place of them? But now that we know that those guys are full of malarkey and they don't even understand the rule that they still complain about today, literally still thinking that welfare is taking black men out of the home, let's talk about how by 1968, it was completely done away with. Yeah, the man in the house rule was done away with a Supreme Court ruling. So now we know that black men hated this rule so much that they were fired up to make a change. Here's a picture of all of the black men who went to Washington, D.C. to tell the powers that be to fix it. Yeah. But guess who did petition the Supreme Court to have her good-for-nothing black man under her roof? A black woman. But let them keep lying and playing the victim. The government won't let me father my kids. All of the black men who didn't want to be taken out of the home by welfare can thank Mrs. Sylvester Smith of Alabama. She was a black woman who had been receiving welfare assistance for her 4 children. She had a job, but it was a low-paying job, and the father of 3 of her children had died. The father of her 4th child was nowhere to be found. I guess that he left before welfare had a chance to take him out of the home. Anyway, because of her situation, she qualified for benefits and had received them until the man in the house policy went into effect. Why? Because of the substitute father in her life, a black man named Mr. Williams. But it is unlikely that he was being any kind of father to her 4 children, because this bastard had 8 of his own children he was not taking care of. Some sources say 9. So welfare didn't take him away from his children, his dirty dick did. But because of Mr. Williams' attachment to Mrs. Smith, she lost her benefits for her and her children. So she took the case to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, ruled in her favor, thus ending the man in the house rule, allowing bums all over the country to provide peanuts to single mothers in exchange for a safe haven away from their own damn kids. So, the very next year after the man in the house rule came to be, it ended. That being said, the next time you hear a black man say that welfare took black men out of the house because black women wanted welfare checks instead, especially if he is using that excuse to still be a loser in the present year, call him a liar, and whatever you do, do not let him spend the night with you. So this is where this video originally ended, but I have a little bit more to say. You can probably see that my Patreon ad is getting ready to pop out through the screen, and this is a repost. So first I want to say thank you to Anonymous Lioness, is the person who asked me to re-upload this video. This is a video that had been unlisted on my channel, I think since 2023. And I'm only re-uploading it because I think that it's a really good video to cap off Black History Month, because this is a lie that has been repeated frequently and repeatedly within the confines of the Black collective. And I just think that it's important to tell the truth about this story. Black women did not exchange their men for welfare checks. The notion of that is just stupid, right? And I'm also adding on to this video because I was finally able to find a photograph of this woman, Mrs. Sylvester Smith, who ended this. So you saw it in the video, and I'll put it on the screen again. This is the only photo that I was able to find of her with her children. And, you know, I wish that I had one of her face, but she's got her head hanging down. And let me tell you, I would have my head hanging down too, because of this ridiculous relationship that she was in with this man who was known to be a married man. And I can't help but wonder if he remained married after this story got out, you know, considering that he had all these children with his wife, and this became very public knowledge. And so I want to share with you this snippet from a story about this, you know, man out of the house rule ending. This comes from an Alabama Journal article from 1968. Let me read it for you. So again, for all the complaining that black men were doing because they didn't want to be quote-unquote thrown out of the house, it was this black woman who went to the Supreme Court, and this is what this article says about her. In part, I'm reading this one paragraph because I want you to hear how ridiculous this relationship is that she was in. It says, the suit was brought by Mrs. Sylvester Smith of Selma, Alabama, against the state of Alabama. She has 4 minor children. They were removed in 1966 from the list of persons eligible to receive aid to dependent children on the ground that a Mr. Williams came to her home on weekends and had sexual relations with her. Mrs. Smith earns between $16 and $20 per week as a cook and waitress. The alleged substitute father, Mr. Williams, has 9 children of his own and lives with his wife and family. He is not the father of any of Mrs. Smith's children. End quote. So this is who was being kicked out of the home, not fathers. And like I said, the government is being generous in calling these guys substitute fathers. I believe that Mr. Williams' interest in being over there at that house had little to nothing to do with being a father figure to her children. He was over there getting it on with her. And welfare, the government, whatever, is saying that we are not going to provide for this man to come over here and eat the food that we are supplying for your children and live off the benefits that we are supplying for your children. And so she still needed the benefits, so that's what she went to fight for. I want to be very clear when I say that this ruling had nothing to do with taking biological fathers away from their children. And it's ridiculous to me that to this day, and at the time that I'm recording this, it's the last day of Black History Month, February 28th, 2025. There are still people, mostly black people, and I will even qualify that further and say mostly black men, running around saying that the state of the black family is in disrepair because black women wanted those welfare checks instead of the fathers of their children. You know, single black mothers who wanted those welfare checks, they're worse than the crack epidemic, according to some of these weirdos. But I'm wanting to just set the record straight for you. And I want to let you know that this is probably the last time that I'm going to address anything from this era. One, because my channel has taken a major pivot, right? I cover historical scandals that are set in the years 1870 to 1940. But when I did my Black History compilation of Black History's Worst, it was insane to me looking at the comments, some of the comments that I was getting from people just saying, oh, all she wants to do is bash black men. That's all this channel is for. When in 2024, all of my videos were about white people, scandals from the Titanic, scandals from the Gilded Age, and I didn't get these kinds of comments. People telling me that I just want to tear down white people. It's so weird. So I want to express to anyone who is listening, watching, that I don't have an agenda on this channel other than to tell you a story that's probably going to make you drop your jaw and say, wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that happened. Or I knew this about that story, but I didn't know that thing that you just said. That's it. So if you have an agenda when you come here, this might not be the channel for you. I want to tell stories about everyone. Because of the periods that I'm covering now, it's a lot easier for me to research rich white people from that era because that's who the press was talking about. That's how you became famous, simply by being rich. And so therefore, there's a lot more information to find out about these people. But I have stories that I'm going to tell about Native Americans. I have stories that I'm going to tell about Asian people and about Latinos and about people who are not from the United States of America. I just want to tell good, scandalous stories that are going to make you drop your jaw. That's my agenda. That's it. And I also want to be clear that when I say that it's mainly black men who throw temper tantrums, frankly, about some of these stories, it's not all black men. I have a lot of support from black men on this channel, like literally financial support, black men who've been channel members of mine as soon as I had the option to open up memberships. And they're level-headed, they're smart, they're decent guys who take care of their families, who come here and support me. And so I'm not grouping all black men into one category. I want to be clear about that as well. But I am saying that I noticed the biggest pushback, and I mean like literally being called out of my name, from black men over these guys I talk about who they idolize and worship. And it's weird. So I have a couple of requests of you. Well, a few. Please give this video a thumbs up, and the next time someone tells you that stupid lie that welfare took black men out of the house, please share with them this video, please. And also, please subscribe to the channel if you like historical scandals about people of all races, men and women. That's what I'm going to get back to in March. I have 184,000 subscribers right now. I would really like to get to 184,001, and I can't do it without you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your support. I'll see you on the next video. This video has been brought to you by me. Well, me and my new YouTube channel, Verified YouTube Guide. Are you just starting your YouTube journey and feeling overwhelmed? Don't worry, I've got you covered. My channel, Verified YouTube Guide, is your go-to resource for practical, step-by-step tips to grow and monetize your channel. It's literally follow-along video tutorials. I'm showing you the steps I took to get 180,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you don't know how to do something, you can just copy my work one step at a time. From setting up your channel to showing you how you can earn money at any stage on YouTube. And I'm not just talking about YouTube ad revenue. If you have something important to say or a service to sell, start talking about it on YouTube now. Don't wait. Subscribe to Verified YouTube Guide today, and let's build your channel together. You don't have to figure this out alone. The link is in the description box. I'll see you there.